We can see.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I was asked by Anna to present you what we do. I apologize for those who attended the recent workshop we made together with EMN on the topic, because it's basically the same content, and it is somehow a bit not strictly correlated to the current crisis in Ukraine. However, yeah, it's a good, I think, illustration of what MFIs can do for financial inclusion of migrants and refugees. And I will try to I will stick to the 15 minutes, so I will be as quick as possible.
Just a brief interruption. That's perfectly fine, Adrian, because this project and this working group is dedicated not only to Ukrainian refugees crisis.
Yeah.
Obviously, it did dominated the recent weeks and topic of this discussion today. But still, we are focused on the wide topic of the refugees, support the refugees inclusion in Europe. So that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So just to tell you as an introduction that the way our target population, all our action is directed to vulnerable entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs. So naturally, we've always been financing and supporting migrants and refugees, which represent altogether about 20% of the people we finance every year. So it's about 6,000 individuals that have migrant backgrounds, born outside the EU, or that are refugees. The thing is, we never really paid any attention to that before 2017. And then we launched a few years after the Syrian crisis, when we saw an inflow of Syrian coming and asking for loans and launching businesses and so on. Well, we realized we had a role to play as well and try to build an approach specific to that target population. So one thing is really like to do our day-to-day job, our mission, meaning to foster their social and economic integration with the main tools that we usually use, meaning access to finance up to 10,000 euro and access to business development services, entrepreneurship development services, and we created a pool of 40 loan officers that are spread all over France and that are sensitized on the issue, that were trained on refugees, on all the administration process and so on, in order to be more informed about what refugees, migrants go through, what are the steps, and be better prepared to support them and address their specific needs. And also try to create exchange of good practices among themselves. And to start tracking in our system all the migrants and refugees that, well, migrants we already did, but more specifically the refugees in our system, in order to be able to make reports and see exactly what's the magnitude of the people we finance. The other thing we do, which is also strictly related to our mission at Adie, is advocacy sensitization. And so it's to promote a positive impact image, let's say, of migrants and refugees into the French society. If some of you follow a little bit the presidential elections, you know that, of course, France is not an exception, but the question of migrants and immigrants and refugees and identity is very hot topic. And so it's our role also to insist on the fact that refugees, migrants have a positive impact. They work, they create wealth, they hire people, and they should be seen as yes, active citizens, and not, of course, as a burden or a threat to the society. And that also contributes, as Gregor was mentioning, to building an environment which is favorable for their economic and social integration. And then, of course, we partner with grassroots and institutional organizations in order to identify, source them, and have a complementary offer between what they do and what we propose. So just to give you an idea, last year we financed from the one that we tracked 260 refugees, and that's a plus 21% increase compared to 2020. And you can see that more than 200 of those were business loans and other were personal loans. By personal loans, we mean access to paid employment or to keep their job, which is basically often the acquisition of a mean of transportation, second-hand car, for instance, or to get their driving license because their home driving license is not recognized and they cannot drive, and therefore that hinders their access to the job market. And of course, we also deliver a lot of non-financial services such as advice, training, and coaching to a larger number of people. The things we observe in terms of challenges and opportunities are not I mean, this is the usual things that everyone working with this target population observe. In terms of challenging, of course, many institutions and support, migrant support organizations, they insist and work a lot on the preliminary phases of when someone enters a given country, in that case France, meaning access to housing, access to education for the kids, to get the papers, and so on and so forth. But the support to enter the job market is not as strong as the previous type of support that I mentioned. And entrepreneurship, of course, is really simply not addressed by most of the social workers and other support NGOs because it's considered as too risky for the migrants and the refugees. Of course, they face language and cultural challenges. One of them being, for instance, the fact that in their home countries, gray or black economy is more common, let's say, and therefore you can be an entrepreneur without necessarily going through the whole business registration and tax payment and so on, which in France is, of course, much more complex. And one of the key issues is I don't understand how and how much I have to pay in terms of taxes. I don't know how to handle that, and this is a key challenge. Lack of digital knowledge, of course, not all of them, but for some, yes, it is. Complex administrative system, I mentioned that already. And Gregor also mentioned the problem of the diplomas and work experience, which are not recognized in their home countries. So that makes their capacity to be able, yes, to do the job they used to do in their home country more complex, or to launch a business. And of course, access to finance is quite impossible, especially if you have a temporary residence permit, especially if it's below 1 year or it's temporary protection, makes the whole access to finance quite complex for mainstream banks. In terms of opportunities, as I mentioned, there are lots of support migrants and refugees organizations. Simply, they mainly focus on language, computer skills, and access to administrative rights, papers, and so on. Good thing is that, of course, entrepreneurship is more developed in many countries compared to France. So they do have already many of them entrepreneurship experience. They are embedded into a community, which some people have been here for a longer period of time, so they can get help from one another. And for instance, the issue of finding a guarantor, which is what we ask for, at least 50% of the amount of the loan that they request, is not an issue as we thought it could be, because they, as I mentioned, they have their community, and because also, as I mentioned, it's very rare that a refugee coming to France will jump into entrepreneurship usually, and that's perfectly normal, would focus on your primary needs, housing, education for the kids, learning the language, getting your papers. And once you have settled the basic conditions, then you can think about, of course, how you're going to, maybe if you want to launch a business or so. And they also have access to a lot of informal network and solution. And therefore, entrepreneurship, yes, can be a solution for if you want to start a new career because you cannot do what you used to do in your home country, and can also be a way of, there are like, for instance, the precarious jobs such as delivery men, the juicers, and so on. They usually they are independent workers. You don't need any skills. You don't need anything. You can start with pretty much nothing. And not saying that we support these kind of things, but well, if this is the way someone can at least get some money, put bread on the table, and learn language and cultural codes of their new host countries, it's something that, yes, we do finance people to help them start these kind of jobs. Okay, some just very practical example of one of our loan officer in Valence, in the southern part of France. She does monthly informational session meetings with, as I mentioned, grassroots or institutional organizations such as OFI. OFI is the French Office for Immigration and Integration. And there is a civic training that is compulsory to any migrants and refugee. And therefore, we intervene in this training to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about access to finance. And that's a way for us to just plant a seed in their brain, and whoever in the future may think of launching a business will or may remember about of us and come to us. That's the main thing, as I mentioned, that we have to partner with other organizations that do work with migrants and refugees in order to be able to identify them, to talk about what we do, what we offer, so that they can get to know us, and eventually, if they need funding, if they need training, support, to actually come and visit us. And of course, we also involve our migrants and refugees entrepreneurs to talk about Adie and share their experience. So anyone willing to or being in need of the services we offer can come to us. Of course, we try to, we did not really, as I mentioned before, adopted specific tools and products, because our target population is very vulnerable, and what we offer is more or less suitable to the refugees. There, we made focus groups, discussions, small survey, and so on. That did not appear any need, a crucial need to change anything in our tools. The only thing is that we have to take a bit more time to explain. We adopted some make some translations, some leaflets, supportive documents to be able to explain what we do and the process of registering the business in foreign languages, so they have a better understanding. But basically, the process is the same. And we, of course, provide one-on-one session with thanks to our volunteers to support them. The need for a stepped approach, meaning we start with a small amount and think about the renewal some months later with a bigger amount if everything goes well, is very important. Being flexible on guarantees. I mentioned our credit policies to ask for a 50% guarantor. So if you need 6,000 euro, you will need someone in your entourage to guarantee 3,000. You don't need to make any deposit and so on, but it's a sort of contract you sign that you will help the client to repay the loan if needed, the installments. And we have already in our credit policy the possibility to waive this guarantee requirement. And therefore, in some cases, yes, we need to be able to waive this to allow someone who cannot find a guarantor to access our loan. Of course, not all of them have declared activities with banking statements where you can see all the way they handle their money. Most of them use cash management and so on, and therefore you need to be able to take that into consideration. And for some of them coming from, for instance, Muslim countries, we substitute the interest rate by an upfront fee. Therefore, they do not have to pay interest, and that makes the offer compatible with their religious belief. Even though it's not a proper Sharia compatible financing product, it is still better than having a front interest rate as in the pricing. And as I mentioned, people exchanged. I mean, our pool of 40 loan officers exchange, and we organize meetings, physical and online, to exchange about their good practices. How did they manage to work with this grassroots organization? How did they waive the barriers that or the obstacles that their migrants and refugees faced, and so on. And maybe last thing, just an example from an Armenian woman, which illustrates what I mentioned before. She was handling an undeclared entrepreneurial activity when she came to us. The reason why she was informal is that she had problem with the administration. And also because in France, for instance, if you want to open a hairdressing salon, or if you want to make catering, you need specific diplomas or specific authorizations. And that makes the whole thing difficult. So what we did was to finance part of her business, which did not require her to have any particular certificate or diploma. We supported them with during the COVID crisis. And once she got her hairdressing diploma, that she opened a proper salon. She expanded the range of services that she offered, and we finance her again to expand. But it's true that, for instance, the administration in France, being an entrepreneur, especially as micro entrepreneurs like an auto-entrepreneur, does not really looks good for the administration. And when it comes to renewing her residency permit, being an entrepreneur doesn't really help because she doesn't have, so to speak, a sort of stable paid job with an open-ended contract and so on. And yeah, I'm over, so I'm open to any comments or questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrien. Well, it's well known for us here in UFC that Adie has a very impressive history of effective tools and measures in financial inclusion for migrants and refugees. I think they are all worth of disseminating among our partners in this group. Are there any questions from our participants about the experience of Adie and everything what Adrien just said?
Just maybe one additional thing. I haven't heard from any Ukrainian refugees that we have financed already. But as I mentioned, probably there is always a sort of a time period before, as I mentioned, these people actually come to France, are settled, have solved their basic, their main issues, emergency issues and priority needs. and they will probably come to us later on.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of my own experience, well, this crisis is very fresh, and most of these people are still counting on getting back to Ukraine as far as possible, as soon as possible. So yes, unfortunately, when in case the conflict will extend and last more in time, more and more people will then try to activate and try to settle in new conditions. So yes, we definitely expect that to happen. Okay.
Let me ask a question. I have a question. First of all, Adie, thanks for the presentation, and also one of the things to highlight are really those partnerships with local organizations or other the partnerships with organizations supporting migrants like BTS services and others. So that's a good point. And my question is just a practical one or technical one about the guarantees, right? When you mentioned that you there is this requirement of 50% of loan amount guarantee, like in case of refugees, how do you deal with this in practical matters? Can you share what are
as I mentioned, when we launched the project in 2017, my first guess was that we would need to change our product because I thought they're never going to be able to find a guarantor but we made, as I mentioned, focus group. We made a small survey, and they do not. It's not such an obstacle, not more for them than for other our usual customers. When it is, we have another option is to make a cash deposit of 25% of the amount you request. So that's one first alternative to the 50% guarantee from the guarantor. And as I mentioned, the third option is to, in case really there is no possibility, then we can waive the guarantee. And we actually, for some of them, issued loans without any guarantee at all. That remains an exception, but we do it. And the main criteria is not that the customer doesn't want to, but really if he cannot provide any sort of guarantee. If it's a question of I could, but I don't want, that's a different story. But if it's really like I don't have anyone to ask, or I don't have the 25%, if we believe in the story we were told, if we believe in the type of business that the person wants to launch and so on, I mean, it's fine.
Excellent, thanks. And when they are providing actually guarantees, so do they source people from their own social network, other refugees, or some local people they got to know? Like, how does it look like?
The same as the other, yes. They primarily look at their relatives or their entourage, friends, and so on. So in that case, it's mainly their community. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Hello, Adrian. I have a question to you. I know that Adie has a long story with funding of migrants and refugees, but I'm curious, do you have experience with recently arrived refugees to France, and how are you assessing credit risk?
The same way we assess the risk in this is why, I mean, the specificity in our case, I think, is really that in general, we target very people at the basis of the pyramid. So many times, for instance, 1 hour process is to ask for the last 3 banking statements, but some of them do not have any bank account. So sometimes we help them, first of all, open a bank account. So in that case, we don't have any track record to analyze the way they handle their money, right? or sometimes they have a bank account, but what they do, they receive their social benefits, can be about 500 euro a month. They withdraw it in a lump sum and then manage cash. And so you have no operations on the banking statement to rely on to make any sort of analysis. So the only thing is to insist more on the story that you're told, see if it's coherent, if it's credible, spend more time on the analysis of the profile of the person, what she or he wants to do, and rely on the etymology of credit word, which is credere, which is to believe, to give trust. So if we believe that this person is, and by cross-checking information that along the process, the appraisal process, the person has been providing to us, and because as I mentioned, we adopt a stepped approach, meaning that we start with low microcredit. We don't take unconsidered risks. The risks remain limited. And it's our mission and job to try. If we think that, yes, the person is being honest, is reliable, and even if we don't have any written proof, let's say, we would still go for it.
I have two more questions, if I may ask. Do you have the time? Okay, so your clients are already French citizens? I mean, they are with French IDs? No. This is my first, with refugee ID from France, or what is their document by applying? Let's say about the more risky, because the ones that are for already 10 years or something like this, it's more or less clear. But for more risky ones, what is their ID? And the second question is, do you have for a certain period at least that the client to be in France to be funded, or somebody could just come, has come 1 month prior and get a loan if they already have a bank account, for example?
What our credit policy says is you need to have a residency permit in France, a valid one. Be it temporary, be it 6 months, 1 year, even if it's sometimes when it's a renewal, you already had one and you're asking for renewal, we can accept that if we have a sort of paper that they have asked for their renewal. So there is no rule. The only thing we have to respect, we need to have an official documentation document issued by the French administration. So it cannot be an ID issued from a third country. It has to be issued by the French administration, but it can be temporary. Most of them indeed are temporary. They have temporary residency permits, or they have a refugee status, or temporary, or asylum seekers, and so on. The only thing is that when you are an asylum seeker, what we're very cautious is, do you have the right to work? And in some cases,
okay, just so if, for example, now an Ukrainian refugee is coming to France and has received the temporary document for refugee from, let's say, 1 week ago, this is a potential client for Adie, or there should something be done in addition?
No, it's fine, but this is why I was very interested in looking at all the documents that Gregor mentioned before, because he mentioned something about making it easier to get access to be able to have the work authorization. So if the paper he has, even if it was issued the day before, allows him to work, I'm fine.
Thank you.